Welcome everyone to our Texas Science Festival Science Under the Stars presentation. We are Science Under the Stars, so we're a regularly occurring outreach series hosted usually at Bracken Ridge Field Laboratory, but now we're on Zoom. But we're made up of a bunch of grad students, and pretty much what we do is each month, the second Thursday of each month during the semester, we have grad students give talks and outreach. So if this is something that y'all end up enjoying, even though we're not technically Texas Science Festival, even though our presentation is right now, you can head to scienceunderthestars.org and sign up for our email list, and you'll get regular updates about who's speaking and the topics of who will be speaking as well. We also have a Facebook page that disseminates good information about when these talks are going to be. So thank you everybody for showing up, and we'll introduce the speaker and get started shortly. All right, everyone, we're going to go ahead and get started. So welcome everybody to our Science Under the Stars presentation at the Texas Science Festival. We're really happy to be a part of it this year. It allows us to reach a lot more people. And so I'm going to introduce our speaker, who's going to talk to us about snakes today. So our speaker today is Thom Marshall. He's a graduate student with us here at the University of Texas at Austin. He is in, Thom, remind me of the Hillis Lab.
Yeah.
The Hillis Lab, that's correct. And so what Thom does is he uses genetic data to understand how snakes are evolving into different species. And currently he is investigating the causes of some conflicting genetic signals within rat snakes. And he hopes by looking at these conflicting signals to gain a better understanding of the genetic diversity of the species as a whole. And what's really cool is he's always been interested in nature and wildlife like most of us, but he is one of the few Texas master naturalists in our program. So it's kind of awesome that we get somebody of Thom's caliber to really get to talk to us about these snakes of Central Texas. So Thom, without further ado, take us away, and everybody sit back, relax, and enjoy.
All right. Thanks so much, Kyle. And thanks everyone for coming out tonight. Really excited to talk to you about the snakes of Central Texas. We have a lot of diversity here in this region and a lot of cool snakes that have some interesting things about them. But before I get into talking about the individual species that we can find here in Central Texas, I want to first start with a very basic question, which may seem like a very simple question, but
hey, Thom, I apologize. This is terrible etiquette on my part.
Oh, no problem.
I apologize to everybody. So we do have a Q&A. So as a webinar, we can't really chat into the chat fields, but we do have a Q&A panel at the bottom. Feel free to type in your questions there, and we'll get to most, if not all of the questions at the end of the webinar. So even if they don't show up on the answered portions, just sit tight and we'll answer them, or Thom will answer them at the conclusion of his talk. Thom, I'm really sorry, but thanks everybody.
No problem. All right, so I want to talk a little bit about what snakes are, because there are a lot of myths and misconceptions about snakes. And to answer that question, I want to start by talking about snakes in an evolutionary context. So this picture here on this slide is what scientists call a phylogeny. And what a phylogeny shows is it's essentially a family tree that shows relationships between different groups of organisms. And how we tell how closely one group of organisms is related to another is based on how recent the common ancestor between those two groups is. So you can relate it to your own family tree. So if you have siblings, you're more closely related to your siblings than anyone else besides your parents. And the reason is because you share a very recent common ancestor, your parents, right? So if you have someone else who's more distantly related, the common ancestor that you have between them and you is from longer ago in the past. So it's the same thing with a phylogeny, showing relationships between different groups of organisms. So one thing that might not be obvious, or we might not think about a lot, is that humans and snakes have some things in common. We do share some common ancestors from the past. So one thing that we have in common is that we're both vertebrates. So that means that we have a backbone and a skeletal structure, and we share a common ancestor in the past that was a vertebrate. So this phylogeny here is a family tree of all the major vertebrate groups. And besides just being vertebrates and having that in common with snakes, we're also both tetrapods. So tetrapods means 4 limbs, and everything that's a tetrapod is something that evolved from an animal with 4 limbs. And you might say, well, wait a minute, snakes don't have limbs, which is obviously correct, but they evolved from an organism that did have limbs. And so we share that in common with snakes. We both evolved from an ancestor a long time in the past that had 4 limbs. Another thing that we have in common with snakes is that we're amniotes. So this sets us apart from animals like fish and frogs that lay their eggs in water, and their eggs are fertilized in water. So as opposed to that, reptiles and mammals that are amniotes, the embryos of the organisms develop inside the mother, and we lay eggs or give birth to live young on land as opposed to water. And so this is where reptiles like snakes and mammals like humans went our separate ways. So at this point, we diverged in our evolutionary history, and snakes are unique from mammals like humans in that they're reptiles, and they are related to other reptile groups like birds, which is kind of an interesting fact. We don't often think about birds as being reptiles, but in terms of what other organisms they're most closely related to, they are really reptiles. And if we added some more detail to this tree, you'd see some other reptile groups on here, like crocodilians, like alligators and crocodiles, would share this branch with birds, and lizards would share this branch with snakes. So lizards are the closest relatives of snakes, the closest living relatives, and they form a group called the squamates. And so what's the difference between snakes and lizards? And that might seem like an obvious answer because snakes don't have legs, right? And lizards do. Well, this isn't as an obvious an answer as it might seem. So here are 4 pictures of 4 different animals, and they may all look snake-like, but one of them is not. And so I'd like to just ask you to take a few minutes to look at these pictures and think about which animal you think is not a snake. And I'll talk to you a little bit more about the characteristics that all snakes share that make them unique. So scientists think that snakes evolved from lizards or lizard-like organisms to live a subterranean or underground lifestyle. And so they developed these adaptations that suited their underground lifestyle. So they lost limbs, they lost eyelids, and instead of having eyelids, all snakes have a scale that covers and protects their eyes. And they lost external ears as well. Some other characteristics that snakes share are a forked tongue. They have lightened and highly mobile jaws that allow them to swallow and eat large prey items. And they shed their entire outer layer of their skin or epidermis all at once, whereas most lizards shed little pieces of their skin off over time. So if you take a look at these pictures and think about it, what you might notice is that this animal right here on the top left has an opening behind the eye, which is an external ear. So this is actually a lizard, not a snake. So even though it may appear to be a snake at first glance, it's really not. And the main characteristic that you can tell that is by its external ear opening. So one thing to point out is that snakes do share these characteristics with some lizards. Some lizards don't have limbs. Some don't have external ears. Some lizards have forked tongues. But the fact that all snakes have all of these characteristics and share them makes them unique and makes them snakes. And snakes are a surprisingly diverse group. So even though they originally are believed to have been evolved for an underground lifestyle, they've since taken over all kinds of habitats above ground and even in the ocean. There are lots of sea snakes. And they comprise about 3,500 species from over 20 families. They range in size from this tiny thread snake or blind snake that you can hold in the palm of your hand to this reticulated python, which can grow over 20 feet long. And snakes are highly successful, highly diverse, found almost all over the world except for places where it's really cold and certain islands, in virtually all habitats from deserts to tropical rainforests. And in these ecosystems, in these habitats, they provide a lot of services and benefits to their ecosystems. They play important roles. All snakes are predators. One thing that they all have in common is that they're all carnivorous. And they're predators of a diverse range of species. So they help to keep other populations under control. And one thing that's particularly helpful for humans is that a lot of snake species eat rodents, and they keep rodent populations in check, which is good for us because rodents can spread disease and they can cause damage to human-made structures. And they themselves are also an important food source for a lot of other animals, like this raptor here at the bottom right. So one concern that is on top of a lot of people's minds is, aren't snakes dangerous? We know some are venomous. Aren't they a threat to being outdoors in nature? And so I want to take some time to sort of alleviate your fears about that and to try to convince you that snakes, we don't really have that much to fear from snakes if we're careful with them and treat them with respect. So of about 3,500 species across the world, only about 600 are venomous to a degree that can be harmful to humans. And here in Central Texas, we have about 35 species, give or take, and 6 of those species are venomous. There are causes of fatalities annually that are much more common than snake bites. Some of these include deaths from car accidents, drownings, boating accidents, firearms. You're more likely to die from getting struck by lightning than you are to die from a snake bite. And you're also more likely to die from getting bitten by a venomous arthropod like an insect or spider than you are from a snake. And it's a popular misconception that some snake species are very aggressive and will chase you. And this is not true. Snakes view humans as potential predators, and their goal is to escape from them. So one species here in Central Texas that seems to particularly have this reputation is a cottonmouth. And so I'm showing these pictures here of a cottonmouth that I encountered along a creek last summer. And I spent a few minutes and took pictures of it. And all it did in response, it stayed still. It tried to stay unnoticed as long as it could. And then when it started feeling uncomfortable, it moved in the opposite direction into some vegetation to get away from me. So snakes are not out to get you. They want to get away from you. A lot of times if people startle a snake and they're standing in between where a snake is and where it knows there's shelter, it might react in a way that looks like it's chasing you, but really all it's trying to do is get to a place where it can feel safe. So also to continue to try to alleviate your fears about snakes, there's some snake bite statistics that are encouraging. There are about 7,000 to 8,000 people bitten by venomous snakes in the US annually. And of those bites, there are some common demographics that pop up. So 55% of those snake bite victims are males within the age range of 17 to 27. So a demographic that's known for taking taking risks and maybe not being as cautious as they should be. 57% of victims were handling the snake at the time of being bitten. 28% were intoxicated. And of all of those bites, only 0.2%, or about 1 in 500, were fatal. There are about 1 to 2 deaths from snake bites in Texas annually. And of all of these venomous snake bites, roughly half of them are dry bites, which means that the snake didn't inject venom when it bit. Venom is a valuable and not unlimited resource for snakes. They use it to subdue their prey. And so they would prefer not to use it if at all possible. So I hope that some of these statistics show that taking some precautions, giving snakes space, not picking them up, especially if they're venomous, but even if you're not sure if the snake is venomous or not, you should assume that it is. And if you take some basic precautions, you can eliminate most of your risk from being bitten by a snake. Now, that said, a venomous snake bite is a serious event, should be taken seriously. So I don't want you to think otherwise. You should seek medical attention, and but you should be fine if you do seek medical attention. It is something that you want to avoid because snake bites can be expensive to treat, and it's an unpleasant experience. But the chance of dying from a snake bite is very small. So what a lot of people wonder is when and where they'll most likely find snakes, and where will we find snakes here in Central Texas? And to answer that, we can kind of first start with the when question. It's helpful to understand a little bit more about the physiology of snakes and the fact that, like most reptiles, except for birds, they're ectotherms. And that means that snakes, instead of regulating their own body temperature like we do, they absorb heat from their surroundings, from their environment, and they are essentially the temperature of their ambient surroundings. So when it's too cold, snakes will brumate during the winter months. They'll find shelter underground or in a tree stump or in a log, something like that. And they'll slow down their metabolism and stay very inactive. Now we call it brumation instead of full hibernation because snakes will come out if it's nice outside. So we have a lot of nice winter days here in Austin. So if it's sunny and the temperatures are moderate, then you might see a snake out during the winter months basking in the sun. In Central Texas, the most common time to see snakes, the peak activity is from March through October. And the most abundant to see them out moving is coming up pretty soon from April to June. This is when it's warm and when there's some moisture. We get some rainfall during those months. And it's a great time for them to be out looking for food and looking for mates. Now, during the summer, when it gets too hot and dry, snakes will tend to be more nocturnal and be not as active. It can get too hot for snakes. Some of them are prone to desiccation, which means drying out. So we're coming to the time of year where we should expect to see snakes out if we're outside in nature. And where might we find snakes? And this can be anywhere that there's appropriate habitat for them. Snake species differ in the habitats that they prefer. And to help answer this question, we can first talk a little bit about the ecoregions that we have here in Central Texas. So we have a pretty diverse range of ecoregions here in this region, in this area. And here in Austin, we kind of sit right at the edge of two very different ecoregions. So to the east, we have the Blackland Prairie, which is an area that has very rich clay soils and was historically a tall grass prairie. Now it's primarily used for agriculture. And to the west, we have the Balcones Canyonlands, which is hilly and rocky with shallower soils and with lots of canyons with creeks running through them. Further to the west, we have the Edwards Plateau woodland and the Llano uplift. So these three regions to the west together are often grouped together and called the hill country. And then to the east, we have the post oak savannas which are a mix of post oak woodland and grasslands. And within the post oak savanna is a region that a lot of you may know about, which is called the Bastrop Lost Pines. And this is a ecoregion with lots of pine forests and is more typical of what you might expect further east in East Texas. So all of these places have a unique set of, a unique combination of vegetation, different soils and geologies. And all of that plays into creating different habitat types that different snake species find suitable for them. So next up, I'm going to start talking about the individual snake species that you can find in Central Texas. And in those slides, I'm going to refer to some of these ecoregions and talking about where you might expect to find them. So the first group of snakes that I'm going to talk to you guys about is our common fossorial snakes. And when I say fossorial, I mean snakes that spend most of their time underground. So this group of snakes includes very small snakes. A lot of people mistake them for being juveniles, when in fact the adults themselves don't get over a foot long generally. And these are snakes that just need some good soil to inhabit. People often find them in their backyards gardening or out moving around their house after a rainstorm. And the first one that I'm going to talk about is the Texas thread snake, or also called the blind snake. This is the smallest snake that we have in Texas. It's very unique because it's the only member of its family in this region. And it's, at first glance, it almost looks like an earthworm. It doesn't have a noticeable head that's differently shaped from the rest of its body. It's the color of an earthworm. But if you look at it more closely, you can see that it does have scales. If you pick it up and hold it, you'll see that it has, you may see that it has a forked tongue. And it also has these small vestigial eyes, which are reduced in size and complexity because they spend so much time underground. These snakes like sandy and loamy soils, they're increasingly common in semi-arid to arid habitats. So we find them around here in Austin and more to the west than to the east. They provide a beneficial service because they eat termites, and they also eat ant and termite larvae and their eggs. And they're oviparous. So this is something I haven't talked about yet, but snakes are interesting in that some of them are oviparous, which means that they lay eggs, and others are viviparous, which means that they give birth to live young. So with each of these slides, I'm going to tell you whether the species is oviparous or viviparous, just to give you a sense of how these snakes live their lives. So another common snake that you might see around your yard is the rough earth snake. These look a little bit more like typical snakes. They like damp soils. I've seen quite a few around my house under stones in the yard. And they like more moist habitats compared to the blind snake. So they are found in the eastern part of the hill country, in all around Austin and to the east in this area. They eat invertebrates like earthworms, snails, and pillbugs, and they're viviparous. So these snakes give birth to live young. Another related snake is the Decay's brown snake. This snake gets a little bit larger. On average, it can get over a foot long, just barely. And these snakes like woodlands and grasslands with ample moisture, kind of similar in their distribution to the rough earth snake in that they like more moist areas. You can find them in the green belts around town, under rocks, and maybe in your backyard as well. And they eat earthworms and slugs and snails. And they're also viviparous. And the flat-headed snake is another common small fossorial snake that we have that looks similar to the rough earth snake at first glance. One way to distinguish it is that it has this bright kind of pink, salmony pink belly, which makes it stand out and gives it away instantly. So these snakes are distributed all throughout central Texas. They seem to be especially common in the hill country, and they eat invertebrates like centipedes and insect larvae. So the next group of snakes that I'm going to talk about are a group of aquatic and semi-aquatic live-bearing snakes called natricines. These species that I'm going to talk about are pretty abundant all throughout Central Texas. A lot of them are anyway. The first one that I'm going to discuss is the western ribbon snake. Here in Central Texas, these snakes have a really vivid red dorsal stripe down their back. They're kind of medium-sized snakes, but very slender, and they're super common around our green belts here. Anywhere near some kind of water source, you have a good chance of spotting them. They live alongside streams, rivers, ponds, cattle tanks all throughout Central Texas. They love to eat toads and frogs, and they especially like cricket frogs, which are a common small frog that we have here in Central Texas. They're viviparous like all of the snakes in this group. A relative of the ribbon snake is the black-necked garter snake. These snakes are not quite as abundant generally as the western ribbon snake, but they're strikingly beautiful snakes, perhaps subjectively speaking, among the most beautiful snakes in Central Texas. They like rocky canyons next to springs and streams. So these guys are slightly more of an arid region snake. They're found throughout the hill country, but not really east of town. They also like amphibians as their favorite prey. The checkered garter snake is a relative. It's common to the west and south of town. These guys are maybe not quite as tied to water sources as other garter snakes and ribbon snakes, but they do still need some moisture because they like to eat amphibians. But you can find them a decent ways away from water in grasslands and savannas, and even in West Texas out in some pretty dry deserts as well. So the water snakes are another group of snakes that are still part of this natricine group, a little more distantly related to the garter snakes, but still related. They grow larger, and they're also super common around aquatic habitats all throughout Central Texas. So the plain-bellied water snake is maybe the most common snake that we might see around town at Lady Bird Lake or along any kind of creek that we have here. These snakes also eat frogs and toads, and they'll also eat fish as well. And they're really common snakes. One way that you can tell these snakes apart from the cottonmouths, which can be confused for them, is that water snakes have these what are called labial bars, these bars along their mouth that are vertical to their mouth line. That differentiates them, or is one characteristic that differentiates them from venomous cottonmouths. Another water snake that's pretty common in this area is the diamondback water snake. These can grow to be a little bit more heavy-bodied and bigger than the plain-bellied water snakes. They specialize a little more in larger, slower-moving bodies of water, and they're also found throughout Central Texas. They really like fish as their primary food source, and you can see them with some pretty big catfish that they manage to consume, and they're viviparous as well, like the other snakes in this group. So the next group of snakes that we'll discuss are the rear-fanged snakes. So this is an interesting group. These snakes have fangs further back in their mouth, and they do have venom. It's usually not particularly dangerous to humans, and they use it to subdue their particular prey items. This snake group is generally more common in the tropics in Central and South America. We only have one species here in Central Texas that's particularly common, and that's the eastern hognose snake. So these snakes are very mildly venomous, but not in a way that's considered dangerous for humans. It is dangerous for the toads and frogs that they like to eat. These are some of the more interesting snakes in our area because they have a very elaborate death feigning display as a defense. So if they're approached by a perceived predator, they'll first flatten their head and neck, to almost look sort of reminiscent of a cobra, and they'll expel air from their lungs, making a hissing sound, and they begin to start to writhe around, looking like they're in some kind of agony, and then they'll roll over on their back and play dead. They're funny snakes too, because if you turn them back over on their stomach, they'll insist that they're dead and roll back over on their back. So these snakes are pretty common all throughout Central Texas in the right habitat, which is loose and sandy soils in open woodlands, anywhere where there's plenty of toads to eat. The next group of snakes is a fairly large group. This is a group called the colubrines. It consists here in Central Texas of harmless, non-venomous egg-laying snakes. So all of these snakes are oviparous. And probably the most common large snake of this group in urban areas here in Central Texas is the Texas, or also called the Western rat snake. This snake is really common around Austin, and I think one of the reasons is that it's highly arboreal, which means it spends a lot of time in trees. So it takes advantage of the fact that we have lots of trees in neighborhoods and in parks. It can go unnoticed a lot of the time in tree cavities and up in the canopy. But they're good snakes to have around because their preferred prey are rodents, and they help provide a service of rodent control. They're one of the snakes that do that the best for us. They will also eat birds and their eggs. Some people who raise chickens have some issues with them because they can invade chicken coops and eat chicken eggs. But overall, they're a beneficial snake. They're found all throughout Central Texas in brushy and wooded areas primarily. And a relative of the Texas rat snake is the Emery's or Great Plains rat snake. So these snakes are a little bit smaller. They don't get quite as big as the Texas rat snake. They're also a little more shy around humans. They don't inhabit urban areas to the extent that Texas rat snakes do. But they're found in a variety of habitats throughout Central Texas. They also eat small mammals and birds. And they're also one of the species that's known to inhabit some of the caves that we have here in the region and feed on bats. Another species that we have that is known to have a particular fondness of bats is the coach whip. These are really cool snakes. I like to refer to them as the hawks of the snake world because they rely on their eyesight more than a lot of other snake species do. They're diurnal, which means that they're active during the day. And you might see a coach whip in a field with its head sticking up out over the grass, scanning the environment for prey. They eat a pretty wide variety of prey items, from small mammals to birds to lizards, other snakes and frogs. They're very much generalists in terms of what they eat. And they're very fast. They're very fast and quick and hard to catch because they're so quick. So a relative of the coach whips is the eastern yellow-bellied racer. So these are similar. They play a similar role in their ecosystems in that they're also diurnal hunters that actively forage for prey. These snakes are really pretty. They have this nice grayish green color on their backs and a really bright yellow belly. And in our region, they're found more to the east from the eastern hill country and into the post oak, blackland prairies and post oak savannas. Not so much more into the arid parts of the hill country. They also have a pretty wide diet range and are also really quick. They're hard to come across because they're good at moving quickly out of the way as you approach them. The Texas patchnose snake is another species that's related to the coach whips and racers. These snakes are more adapted to semi-arid and arid habitats. In Central Texas, they're really common throughout the hill country and maybe just a little bit into the blackland prairies east of here. They specialize in eating lizards and reptile eggs. And they may look superficially a little bit like the garter snakes and ribbon snakes that I talked about earlier, but they're not closely related to those snakes. They do have these dorsal stripes that's somewhat similar. One unique characteristic they have that gave them their name is the fact that they have this enlarged scale at the end of their snout, and that's why they were named patch nose snakes. Another cool snake that's common in our area is the rough green snake. So this is a really arboreal snake that spends most of its time in the trees. They are found in woodlands, along open areas or waterways throughout central Texas. They eat primarily invertebrates like insects, spiders, and slugs. And these snakes really blend into their surroundings really well because of their lime green color and the fact that they spend so much of their time in understory trees like yopon and possum haw. But these are really nice snakes to come across because they have this really like vivid lime green color. So next I'm going to talk about some snakes in this group that are less abundant or at least less widely distributed across central Texas. So the king snakes are more common in other parts of Texas and the country, but here in central Texas, these snakes are really rare. The only part of the area that they're likely to be found in is the Blackland Prairie. And they're also very secretive snakes. They're largely nocturnal and they're hard to come across. So if you do see one of these snakes out, you're really fortunate to see one. So the snake on the top is what we call an intergrade, which is kind of like a hybrid between the speckled and the desert king snake. So that's what we have here in our region, is kind of a hybrid between those two subspecies or species. Then at the bottom is the prairie king snake. Both of these snakes specialize in eating other snakes. The prairie king snake is a little bit more of a generalist and will more often take some small mammals and lizards as well. But these are some cool snakes because they're so rare in our area. Also, some snakes that aren't widespread across central Texas but are common in certain areas are the glossy snake and the bull snake. So the glossy snake here pictured up at the top, this is a juvenile. So these snakes do get larger, can range from about 3 to 4 feet on average. They're specialists in terms of the habitat that they are found in. They like sandy soils. They burrow in sandy soils. So in central Texas, they're only found where sandy soils are abundant. So here they're found in the post oak savanna and Lost Pines to the east, and in the Llano uplift to the west. These snakes like small mammals and lizards primarily. The bull snake is one of our larger non-venomous snakes in the area. They're not as common as rat snakes generally in most places, but they play a similar role in that they eat small mammals and occasionally some other types of prey as well. These snakes in central Texas can be found in the Blackland Prairie, and they can also be found further west in the hill country in the Edwards Plateau woodland and the Llano uplift. So all of the snakes that we've talked about so far are non-venomous, or at least if they have some venom, they're not considered harmful to humans. But the next snakes that I'm going to talk about are the 6 species that I mentioned earlier that are venomous in Texas, in central Texas. So the first snake that I'm going to talk about is unique in that it's the only snake that belongs to the elapid family, which includes coral snakes and kraits from other parts of the world. So the Texas coral snake is found in wooded areas with leaf litter primarily. They're found throughout central Texas in the right habitat. They're most common in the Balcones Canyonlands just to the west of town, and in other wooded areas like the Lost Pines, for example, they're pretty common. These snakes specialize in eating other snakes, particularly the fossorial snakes that we talked about earlier. So rough earth snakes, blind snakes, and snakes like that are some of their favorite prey. But I've also seen them eating juvenile rat snakes as well. Um, these snakes are oviparous, and the rest of the venomous snakes that I'm going to talk about are all share something in common, in that they're pit vipers. And as pit vipers, some of the characteristics they share are that they're viviparous, they give birth to live young, and they have a heat-sensing pit between their nostril and eye that helps them detect prey items. So the copperhead is a common snake in parts of central Texas. They inhabit woodlands, especially near features like ridges and rocky ledges, and in places where there's lots of leaf litter, where they blend in quite well. They're found, they're especially common to the east of town, in places like the Post Oak Savanna and the Lost Pines region around Bastrop. They're really abundant in those areas. And they're also not uncommon in the oak juniper woodlands that we have in the Balcones Canyonlands to the west of town. They eat small mammals and amphibians, sometimes other reptiles. And one prey item that's interesting that they really enjoy are cicadas. So in certain places, you can potentially see copperheads congregating in large numbers as cicadas emerge from the ground in the summer. This is something that they like at that time of year. So a relative of the copperhead is the cottonmouth. The cottonmouth is unique here in Central Texas among pit vipers, in that it lives in primarily aquatic and semi-aquatic habitats. So here in this part of the state, cottonmouths are tied mostly to the major river systems that we have. They're more widespread in East Texas and along the coast. But here they're found primarily in river bottomland forests and along streams and springs with plentiful surrounding vegetation. They have a pretty wide range of prey items as well, that includes fish, amphibians, often other snakes, birds, and small mammals. And they have a unique way of defending themselves. When they're approached by a potential predator, they'll flip back their head and open their mouths and show the white lining of their mouth to show that they don't want to be threatened anymore, to try to scare you away. The largest venomous snake in our area is the western diamondback rattlesnake. So these snakes are pretty common throughout the hill country and in the Blackland prairies just to the east of Austin. They're found in brushy areas, grasslands, and a pretty wide range of habitats, as long as they're kind of open, semi-arid habitats. They're often found in association with prickly pear because their rodent prey can often be found within prickly pear, and they can take shelter within prickly pear as well. They prefer small mammals as their prey items. And they're by far the most common rattlesnake in Central Texas, but we do have a couple other less common rattlesnakes in certain parts of Central Texas. And I'm going to talk about these two next. The timber rattlesnake is a very rare snake in our area. It inhabits woodlands and river bottomlands. In our region, it can be found in parts of the Post Oak Savanna and then the Lost Pines. This is a really exciting snake to find in the area because they are so rare. If you do see one, keep distance. Stay safe and keep a safe distance away from it. But something that should be appreciated if you happen on one in the wild. The black-tailed rattlesnake is another fairly rare snake in Central Texas. These snakes are more common in arid habitats further west. They generally inhabit rocky and mountainous areas, and they are found in parts of the hill country though. So this snake at the bottom right was found near Wimberley last year. There was a black-tailed rattlesnake that was found in northwest Travis County about 2 years ago. And I believe that was the first recorded sighting of a black-tailed rattlesnake in about 70 years. So that was a pretty amazing find. This was up in far northwest Travis County near Lake Travis. So like other rattlesnakes, these guys, other large rattlesnakes, these guys prefer small mammals as prey, but might eat birds and other prey items as well. And they're also viviparous and give birth to live young. So that concludes my summary of snakes in the region. This wasn't an exhaustive list of the snakes of Central Texas, but it did cover, I think, all of the really common and widespread ones, plus some of the interesting ones, some of the more interesting rare ones and less widespread ones. So before I end my talk, I want to take just a couple minutes to talk a little bit about community science. And if for those of you who are interested in spending time outdoors and documenting what you see, I want to point out the fact that you can take a more active role and join websites that allow you to document your findings. So iNaturalist is a great website that allows you to document any types of life that you observe outdoors, from animals to plants to fungi. And herpmapper.org is specifically geared towards reptiles and amphibians. But this is a great way to provide information to scientists and people who are studying different types of organisms. As someone who studies snakes, I use iNaturalist regularly as a great resource to find out where people are finding certain species. And you can take part in particular projects that have particular goals. So for example, the Herps of Texas project on iNaturalist is a place that's specifically designed to collect a database of reptile and amphibian data in Texas. So these are great ways to get involved if you want to help out researchers. And it can also be great for you as well if you want to post something that you're not sure the idea of, and other users on iNaturalist will be sure to help you out and give you an ID. And if you're interested in finding snakes or anything else in the wild, it can give you some good information on where to find them as well. So that concludes my talk for the evening. I want to thank you guys again for coming out tonight, and I will take any questions that you might have.
Excellent, Thom. I know it's always hard to get an applause or any type of reaction because nobody could put their thumbs up, but I'm gonna give it to you. That was wonderful. That was a treat. It's been a long time since I've been able to familiarize myself with the snakes of the region, so it's always nice to get a nice centralized view of it, especially from a Texas master naturalist, which leads us really well into our first set of questions. So Alexandra Collins wants to know, number one, how do you become a Texas master naturalist? And two, we've noticed these snakes have really, really gorgeous eyes. Are there any genetic adaptations there, considering that they originally evolved as a ground-dwelling reptile with reduced eyesight?
Oh, that's a great question. So I'll take the first question first. So to join the Texas Master Naturalists, they do have a website. I don't have it offhand, but if you Google Texas Master Naturalists, I'm sure you can find it pretty easily. They have a program where you can enroll in courses. They do it once a year, and you take a series of courses on a kind of wide range of topics from different types of animals and plants. There are some like botany courses and herpetology courses. You learn about the geology of the area, and what you're doing is learning about the area so that you can become an informed volunteer. So to stay in the program, you volunteer a certain number of hours, and you can do really cool things like do golden cheek warbler resightings and territory mappings. and things like that. So it's a fun program to be involved in, and I definitely encourage it if it's something that you're interested in. As far as the genetics of snake eyes, this is a little bit out of my area of expertise, and I hate to leave that question unanswered. I'm sure there are some interesting things that are going on there as animals that were subterranean and then evolved to live above ground. And I think that is a very interesting question. That would be interesting to explore further, because I'm sure there are some interesting things to explore there, but I don't have a really great answer for you about that, Alexander.
Cool. All right. Sasha would like to know, and I'm pretty sure a lot of us were wondering this at the time, but how did the snakes of Central Texas fare during the 2021 Arctic blast?
Yeah, that's a good question, because I was a little concerned about them because of, that was pretty brutal cold weather. But they survived. I'm sure that some snakes did not, especially snakes that may have not been in great health to begin with. There might have been a little more of a die-off than usual. Some snakes don't make it through the winter if they're just suffering some kind of infection or otherwise, if they're weakened for whatever reason. We might have had a little bit more of a die-off than usual. It's possible, but I do know that snakes are out now. I'm on several Facebook groups and other online forums where I see that people are citing them. So I don't know that they took too much of a hit. I think snakes have a really long evolutionary history of seeking shelter from weather that they can't survive in. So I think most of them probably made it.
That's good news. Our next question comes from Alexa, who seems to be a young and enthusiastic potential future herpetologist. She's 8 years old, and she is wondering, why do most snakes eat eggs?
Oh, good question. So I would say that it's probably an easy food source, because snakes, an egg isn't going to put up a fight. So snakes take some risk in subduing prey. Animals will fight back, and that can be something that can harm or even kill a snake. So eggs are probably kind of a good strategy to take when trying to find prey items, because they're an easy food source that might be a little less risky.
That makes sense. Anonymous would like to know. So, is it possible to safely go snake spotting, kind of the way you would go birding, or are snakes just kind of too hard to find? So, are there any tips or guides you would recommend for snake identification?
Yeah, for sure. So you can. So what people generally call it herping, which covers not only snakes but all kinds of reptiles and amphibians. It's a little bit different than birding. Birds are pretty much everywhere. You can go birding and be guaranteed to see a bird most times that you go. Snakes are a little bit more difficult to come across, but I think if you know the habitats that snakes like, if you go at the right times when snakes are most likely to be active, and we talked a little bit about that, you stand a good chance. One way that's popular for finding snakes is driving out on country roads at night. And so this is a way that I found some snakes for my research, is driving out on roads at night on warm spring evenings. It's especially good if you have had some recent rain, so there's some moisture around. So that's one way that you can find them. Snakes will be out moving on the roads, or thermoregulating, getting some warmth from the road. There are some good field guides that are out there. There's a few. It's hard to just pick one. So there's a Peterson's Field Guide of Reptiles and Amphibians of Eastern and Central North America. That's a good overall guide for, not just snakes, but reptiles and amphibians. There's also some specific Texas snake books. So the Snakes of Texas by Dixon and Werler is a really awesome, kind of like the Bible of Texas snakes. That's like a big hardcover book, but they do also have a field guide version of it as well. And there are probably some others, but those are some that I'd start with. Anywhere in any kind of green belt is also a great place if you just walk around and stay quiet and kind of be in the moment and look around. It's amazing what you might find sometimes.
Excellent. Thom, I think you're going to like this next one. So Ellen is wondering, how did behaviors like mimicking a cobra or rattlesnake develop in other snake species? Is it convergent evolution? Seems like many species of snakes, both other venomous and non-venomous, have learned to mimic the rattlers.
Yeah, I think that is true. I mean, that's certainly true. A lot of non-venomous snakes, most non-venomous snakes will vibrate their tails as a defense to try to get potential predators or humans to leave them alone. And I think it is convergent evolution, I would say, because I think it's a strategy that developed because it's evolutionary biologists call it mimicry, specifically Batesian mimicry, which means that a harmless or non-venomous species is imitating a venomous one. I think it's just been successful because animals have learned these cues that certain snakes are venomous and are dangerous and should be avoided. And so it's been adopted by these other snakes because these potential predators already are alert to these types of cues.
Awesome. I'm going to combine two questions just because they happen to work really well together. So if you don't mind for another two-party. So
Sure.
Tashar wants to know, how does vivipary work in snakes? They assume it's quite different than what we see in mammals. And then as a follow-up to that, Murabi wants to know, why do so many of the more dangerous snakes tend to viviparity?
Good questions. Tushar, also, hey Tushar, glad you made it to the talk. That's a really good question. I'm sure it is different from what we experience as humans. But I don't have a great answer for you. Yeah, I know Tushar, so we'll talk more later about this. And the other question is, well, I'm sorry, what was the other question, Kyle?
Why do so many of the dangerous snakes tend to exhibit the viviparity?
Yeah. So yeah, vipers are viviparous, and I think that's a really interesting question, why some groups of snakes are viviparous and others are oviparous. And I don't know offhand. The coral snakes and elapids are oviparous. Not all dangerous snakes are viviparous. I think that the vipers are, a very kind of advanced snake. They have a lot of, I hate to say advanced because that is kind of almost like an anthropocentric kind of idea. But vipers, I guess, exhibit behaviors that are similar to mammals, and that there is some degree of parental care involved. So there are some things that we have as mammals in common with vipers that maybe we don't with other snakes. But yeah, sorry I don't have a great answer to that, but I think that's an interesting question.
Nice. Yeah, sometimes it's always hard to kind of tease those apart.
Yeah.
Steve Poole is interested in any other animals that can see heat. Any of you know of, Thom?
Any other animals that can see heat? Oh, these are These are good questions. Do you know of any, Kyle? Um,
I study amphibians. They don't do anything with heat.
yeah. I feel like there are, and I'm not thinking them right off the bat. But yeah, great question.
What came to my mind, even though it's completely incorrect, was the star-nosed mole with like it's
Mhm.
seeing with its nose, but that's through touch, but not heat. So completely irrelevant.
Yeah.
Let's see. All right, we're gonna combine two again. And oh, one's from a previous SUT speaker, which is awesome. Thank you, Emily, for coming back. So, what is your favorite and least favorite part of doing your research, combined with what's your favorite snake?
Oh God. Great question. I think, I mean, my favorite part of doing research, I would say, is going out into the field. I mean, it's great to be outdoors. It's fun looking for snakes. So that's my favorite. Least favorite, uh, you know, it's I don't like saying least favorite, but um, maybe sometimes learning the softwares and computer programs to analyze data, it's a challenge. It can be frustrating sometimes, but it can also be really rewarding when you get them to work. So the computational component is, I would say, the most challenging part of my work. Um, and what's my favorite snake? Also a really hard question because I have a lot of favorites.
Pick your favorite child.
And it varies. Yeah, it just varies from from time to time and when you ask. But I really like the hognose snakes. I just like that whole death feigning behavior and display that they do, and I just think I think they're kind of funny. They seem comical to me.
Excellent. So, Tom, at this point, I would like to ask you to stop the screen share and we'll pull up another couple set of slides that'll just disseminate a little more information about Science Under the Stars in case anybody is interested in gaining a little bit more information in that regard. And while
Sure.
that's happening, I'm still going to throw you some questions.
Sure.
Yeah. So, let's see. Oh man, we got it. Oh, a couple of people have chimed in with the heat response. So some include like vampire bats, the monarch butterflies have the sun compasses, and mosquitoes could potentially sense heat, and maybe salmon and piranhas as well. So question then, some people have seen cottonmouths on their property out by or it's Blackland Prairie that are pretty far from water. Is that common?
So they can be found from some distance from water. I would be interested in knowing how far it is. They usually, at some point are probably going to return to water. But I I don't think it's unheard of. They're uh, they don't have to have water at all times. They don't, they're not like amphibians. They don't need water to breed. Um, I think they're most commonly found in aquatic habitats, but I have heard of cottonmouths being found some good distances away from water.
It depends on how explorative they get to or lost.
Yeah.
All right, so actually, Tashar's back. He would like to know if you get a herping permit soon, how do you handle or wrangle venomous snakes? What are some techniques that are safe and don't stress the snake, other than
Um,
walking the opposite direction?
yeah. So uh, if you are handling venomous snakes, I think first you want to be trained by someone in person. So don't take what I'm saying as training. So I think that would be number one. I think generally using hooks, snake hooks and tongs to grab the snake. Really, if you're trying to capture a snake, tongs is what I use most frequently because a hook is just kind of I use a hook to move a snake off of a road, but if I want to grab a snake, use tongs. And then tubes, tongs and tubes. So tongs to grab the snake, and then tubes to get the snake's head into the tube so that you can safely handle it. But definitely that's something that you want to practice with someone who's experienced before you start doing it.
That makes sense. This might be a trick question because it comes from a Snakes of Central Texas group, but is the indigo snake considered a Texas snake?
Sure. We do have indigo snakes in Texas. I didn't include them in my Central Texas presentation because we don't really have them in the area that kind of I included in that ecoregion map. The closest that they come, I think they're found just south of San Antonio, and they are found in parts of the hill country, but kind of further to the west and south than what I was kind of thinking as being part of Central Texas. But yeah, those are really, really cool snakes, and we definitely have them in Texas.
Cool. So you mentioned a little bit about rat snakes earlier, excuse me. Can you touch a little bit more on your research about them?
Sure. So I am studying a group of rat snakes, and specifically the one that was in my presentation, the Emery's rat snake or Great Plains rat snake. I'm studying the group of rat snakes that snake belongs to. And I'm interested in understanding the relationships between species in that group. So it's the Great Plains rat snake is also related to the Slowinski's corn snake and the red corn snake further to the east. The red corn snake is not found in Texas. I had some interesting questions about those snakes because I have seen them in Texas, and they look very similar. This is the Great Plains rat snake and the Slowinski's corn snake, and they do come into contact. So my questions involve studying whether they hybridized and if they were even really distinct species. So that's what I've been working on now. And I'm also interested in the fact that their mitochondrial genetic data shows that they're pretty divergent, whereas their nuclear genetic data shows them as being much more closely related. So trying to understand the reasons why we get those kind of mixed signals from different genetic markers is a question that I'm interested in.
Nice. All right, double combo again. Coolest snake you've ever encountered, and have you ever been bitten?
Well, I've been bitten by non-venomous snakes for sure. I've never been bitten by a venomous snake because I'm pretty cautious. I've never done research with venomous snakes, to be honest. So I keep it safe for my research. But yeah, bitten by non-venomous snakes lots of times, and it's it's kind of a nuisance. It's they do have teeth and they'll break the skin, but it's just kind of like a minor scratch, not anything more serious than that. And the coolest snake that I found, God, that's also a tough one. I'm gonna go with indigo snake. I found my first one a couple of years ago because I hadn't spent a lot of time in South Texas, and that was they're such majestic snakes. They're such big majestic snakes.
Nice. So, what would cause a black whip snake to chase you away from its nest?
I don't think that's a behavior that is really something that snakes do. Snakes don't really have that much parental care. I did mention that pit vipers do show some parental care, But most snakes lay their eggs or give birth to their young and move on. So that's not something that I would expect from a whip snake. Is this something that's happened before? I'm wondering, or uh,
I'm assuming it's a nice piece of anecdotal evidence that somebody may have seen or personally experienced.
yeah, yeah. It was probably a case of the snake was trying to get to some hiding place, and you were standing in the way. That would be my guess.
That's a bold move. All right, so you mentioned that a lot of snakes include frogs and toads in their diet. Is there a reason that snakes don't eat salamanders?
Well, snakes will eat salamanders as well, and I could have included that in some of my slides, but um, uh, I don't know that any of the snakes that I talked about had salamanders as their, as their first prey or, primary source of food. But they do eat salamanders. A lot of those natricine snakes, the garter snakes and ribbon snakes, will eat salamanders sometimes, um, and um, and some others probably do as well. Um, yeah, I think maybe frogs and toads are probably more abundant maybe in a lot of places here in Central Texas. At least the land dwelling salamanders, we don't have as many of those, and so salamanders may make up more of the snake's diet in other regions.
All right. And speaking of kind of salamanders and then lizards, there are parthenogenic lizards in West Texas. Are there any parthenogenic snakes? And then for those who may not be familiar with parthenogenesis, can you give us a brief overview of that as well?
Yeah, so parthenogenesis is when a female does not need a male to reproduce. So essentially, when her offspring are clones of herself. And to my knowledge, I don't know of any snakes that do that, that are parthenogenic. We certainly don't have parthenogenic snakes in our region, but I don't know of any that are in other parts of the world either. But I could be missing something.
Well, that's fair. Yeah. Closest thing I think of is the mating balls, but that's not parthenogenesis, is it?
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for coming out. If we don't have any more questions, we'll make one final announcement and then end our webinar. This recording will be posted on our website at scienceunderthestars.org. And so if you want to take a look at it or share it, please feel free to do so. There might be a link posted on our Facebook page as well. So thank you everybody for coming out to the Texas Science Festival meets Science Under the Stars and Snakes of Central Texas. Thom, thank you for a wonderful talk. I hope we see some of y'all in the future at our events that we've kind of posted on as well. And thank you again, Thom. Thanks everybody for showing up, and I hope everybody has a great evening.
Thanks, everybody.